Christmas Eve dinner at Burger King. Christmas Eve dinner at Burger King. Sounds innocent enough, right? Not my first choice, but I had to work late, and being Christmas Eve, it looked to be my best choice. I got finished working at 9 and had some coupons for BK, so that made my decision for me. When I got to BK, I noticed it was still open, but the dining room was shut down. The only way I could get something is if I went through the drive-thru. Only problem is I don't have a car. I tried to walk up to the drive-thru and place my order, but the compassionate young lady working the drive-thru wasn't having it. She told me if I didn't have a vehicle I could not use the drive-thru. I became rather aggravated and began saying things that I am not proud of. At this moment, an older woman wearing shining armor appeared on the scene and offered me to jump in her car and order my food. At first I turned her down, not wanting to be a bother, but after some convincing I decided to accept her help. After ordering my food, it took so long to get it that I missed my bus and got upset. The nice woman offered me a ride home, and I felt kinda off-put by the offer and declined. She was persistent but at the same time nice and convinced me to take her offer. Mind you, I am a 250 pounds, 30-some man, so I really didn't feel that threatened by a 50-some woman. If the circumstances were different, I would not have taken the ride. After I told her where I lived, we proceeded home. About 5 minutes from my house, she made a wrong turn. I explained that I lived the other way and that we needed to turn around or let me out here and I will walk the rest of the way. It was then that the woman's demeanor changed and she told me that she could not let me spend Christmas Eve alone and that she was taking me to her house. I told her that I needed to get home immediately to let my dog out and that I would be fine. The woman then tried to entice me with cocaine and liquor at her place. But since I am in recovery, I told her I wasn't interested. She refused to turn around or let me out and started to drive strangely, not stopping at stop signs. I'm not gonna lie, my mind was racing and I began to sweat. I knew that I could physically overpower this woman, but what awaited me at her house? I also felt bad about hurting her after all her kindness, but I had to get away before her house and I didn't know where that was, so I didn't know how much time I had. Then all of a sudden, luckily, the car in front was stopped at a stop sign and across from it another was stopped also. She had to slow down to almost a stop at this point, and this is where I made my break. I jumped out with the car seat till moving, leaving my food in the car, and I took off running. As I was running away, she stopped and got out of her car and began to try to talk me into getting back in the car with her. That just wasn't an option. I don't know what her motives were or who she was, but I knew I wasn't willing to risk my life over it. I ran all the way home and made sure I wasn't followed. What would have happened to me if it was 2 years earlier and I was still doing drugs and drinking? Her offer of cocaine and booze would have probably worked. Kidnapping, murder, sex trafficking, organ trade, or being a man. The thought of the vulnerability most women face every day was so foreign to me, and now I understand the fear most women face. I really feel this nice woman had a nefarious purpose, and that I just so happened to be the perfect victim of opportunity. Mind my races, wouldn't the ruse of such a non-threatening bait just be perfect to lower the guard of a prospective victim? Any thoughts would be appreciated. I never went to the cops because I felt they might not believe me or they might look down on me for being scared. Should I place a police report? What if by me not reporting this that someone else ends up getting hurt, or am I just jumping the gun in conclusions? Dude tried to rob me on Christmas Eve, after work this past Christmas Eve. I work a late shift from 5 p.m. 1 a.m. or until we're done. I should also mention that while the warehouse is in a nicer area, a couple blocks down it gets sketchy at night. We got done around 2 a.m. and me and my one friend were the first out to the parking lot and were standing there talking while we were warming up our cars. We were talking for maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and during that time I saw this small sedan drive by slowly, but didn't think much of it because it was a little icy out and figured they were just being cautious. But then I saw it slowly coming back down the road, came from west and pulled in and parked in the parking lot across from us, which was strange because it's a welding shop parking lot and no one is ever there past 10 p.m. besides police doing speed traps. At that point I pointed it out to my friend and he said he noticed it as well and thought it was weird. Then this big dude got out of the car and walked across the street over to me and my friend while the car he got out of drove off. He asked my friend for a smoke, and as he did that I walked over to my car to start scraping it off, and so he would hopefully just not talk to me. But as soon as I stepped back out of my car with my wallet in hand so I could use one of my cards to scrape the windows, he called over to me. I didn't want to be rude even though something felt off about the situation, but I just said fuck it. There's cameras watching me and the rest of the workers should be out within 10 minutes, so I'll be fine. I'm 6 feet 180 pounds soaking wet, and the dude was a good bit bigger than me. I'm guessing he was 6 feet 3 inches and a solid 250. He was trying to make small talk with me, asking about what we do there, how it sucks we have to work on Christmas Eve, just random bullshit like that, but I got the feeling he was sizing me up. So even though I have extreme social anxiety and can usually barely make eye contact even with people I know, I remembered my grandpa telling me if I'm in a sketchy situation with someone to stand tall, chest out a bit, make eye contact the entire time, essentially do whatever to make you look like you aren't scared or nervous so you look like you're more trouble than you're worth. I saw him keep looking down towards my wallet, so I took a small step back so I could make sure I was in the view of the cameras. Then he said, "So hey man, do you think you could give me a ride to my house? It's just right down the road. I ran out of gas at the store and need to go back to my house to get money." Now the grocery store, he said his car ran out of gas at is about a mile down the road to the east, but yet the dude came from the west. And also, if he needed a ride to his house in the west, why wouldn't he have just gotten one from the person who dropped him off, who came from that direction in the first place? I then remembered reading online somewhere that around the holidays people will do whatever they can to try to get someone to give them a ride, and then they force them to take them back to their house and rob them. At this point I'm like, fuck this dude is trying to rob me, so I just walked backwards towards my car since I know I have a giant knife under the seat, and tell him I'm good and to please get off our company property. And he was like, "Come on man, it's Christmas Eve," while looking visibly pissed, and I said, "That sucks dude. Get off the property." At this point I'm at my car and he can see me reaching under the seat, and he then turns and walks away and disappears in the alley a block away. I then go over to my friend's car to tell him what happened, and he said the dude was trying to get him to give him money for smokes, and then he tried to get him to give him a ride to the ATM. 2 days later a picture of the same guy is on the local police department's FB page asking for information on him because he was wanted in relation to a string of robberies that happened during Christmas week. Christmas Eve home invasion. Personally, the last half of 2017 has been pretty exhausting. The most draining part, both emotionally, physically and financially, has been the laborious task of moving my father into an aged care facility, due to his rapidly advancing dementia. He lives in Tasmania, where I grew up. I'm currently living and working in Brisbane, which is about 2,500 kilometers, 1,500 miles for you Imperials, to the north of Tasmania. I have been making the 3.5-hour flight down to Tasmania about twice a month to sort out my dad's situation. I have been busying myself by fixing up his empty, dilapidated home in order to get it ready to be sold. I moved out all of his furniture and belongings, save for a pile of blankets and pillows that I turn into a makeshift bed on the floor while I'm in visiting. The house is situated in a semi-rural area, surrounded by overgrown trees and bushes. It's an old house, it's damp, everything creaks, and there is currently no electricity, which makes the nighttime very creepy. The house itself is not very secure, no alarm system, the doors have locks, but a forceful nudge will pop the door open. I flew in on Christmas Eve in the late evening, picked up my hire car to make the hour-long drive down to the house. I stopped in at a mate's place, who lives about 10 minutes from my dad's place, to have a few beers and shoot the shit about the year that has just passed. After a couple of hours I realized that I had probably surpassed the legal blood alcohol limit to drive. My mate's legendary wife dropped me off at dad's and offered to come back in morning to pick me up and go back to their place to get my car. A Christmas miracle. I entered my dad's house around midnight. Inside the house was pitch black, and in my slightly drunk state I flipped the light switch and nothing happened. Oh yeah, that's right, no power. Using my phone as a light to navigate my way through the house over the creaky floorboards, I noticed that some of the tools that I had left laying around inside the house had been stolen. I sighed and accepted the fact that it was my own stupid fault for leaving them out in an unsecure house. Some kids probably noticed that no one is living there and took advantage of the situation. It was unsettling knowing that someone had been in here, but I didn't bother calling the police over a hammer, wrench, and screwdriver that came to a grand total of about $16.50. Good news was the big toolbox, which I keep locked up in the laundry cupboard, that houses my more expensive power tools, was still there and intact. I studied the padlock and the space around it, and it looked pretty scratched up and dented. Like someone had crudely attempted to prise it open. Nice try, dickheads, I said aloud to myself. The toolbox is very big and heavy, too big for one person to carry it, unless you're Andre the Giant. Exhausted, I went into one of the furniture-less bedrooms and made my makeshift bed out of the blankets and pillows. I couldn't get comfortable and it was taking me a while to drift off to sleep. As I was laying there, the only sounds I could hear over the ringing of my tinnitus was the gentle rustle of the wind through the trees. I could also hear what sounded like the unmistakable crunch of boots on the gravel driveway that went up the side of the house. I tried to listen harder, then there was a loud gong sound of something solid coming into contact with the metal railing that leads up to the back door. This makes me sit up wide-eyed while my heart rate starts to increase. Maybe it was a wallaby or a possum. I sit there as still as possible, just listening. I can hear the sound of the trees in the wind and nothing else for a few moments, and I start to calm down. This is interrupted by the pop and squeak of the back door being pushed open. Fuck. I freeze, not knowing what to do. I could hear footsteps creaking through the back of the house. And I hear the laundry cupboard being opened. I was up the other end of the hallway, but I could hear whispering. The only words I could make it were "They're quick." I pull myself together and pull out my phone and call the police. I chat to the dispatcher while burying my head under the pillow to muffle my voice. I explained the situation to the dispatcher and she says the police are on their way. While this is happening, I can hear a chink sound of what I'm assuming was the lock of the toolbox trying to be broken. The dispatcher suggests that I lock the door of the room I'm in. I agree, and as I slowly pad over across the room to the door, one of the floorboards creaks so freaking loudly. I freeze and hear dead silence from the laundry. They must have heard. After about 30 seconds of standing still, I try to take another step and get yet another high-pitched creak, but this seems to work in my favor because here my new house guests scatter away out the back door. I lock the bedroom door and tell the dispatcher that I think they have gone. She tells me to stay put until the police arrive, and I tell her I'm more than happy to comply. After about 5 minutes the cops arrive and the dispatcher bids me farewell. The police did a search of the area and found nothing, as expected. They had tried to break open the toolbox. One of the cops says, "Why didn't they just use bolt cutters? Fucking amateurs," and we have a little laugh. I explained to the police about how when I came home some of the tools that I left saying around were stolen and that the toolbox looked like it had already attempted to be broken into. Upon hearing that, the other cop stated his theory of how events took place. They probably broke in earlier tonight before you got here. They grabbed what they could, tried to open the toolbox but couldn't, and then left to go get something to open it with. While they were gone, you came home and then they arrived back here to open the toolbox. I doubt they were dangerous, probably just kids. Good timing, I think to myself. I make a report and that's that. I stayed up until sunrise and then decided to get a couple of hours sleep until my mate's wife, Lucy, came to pick me up to collect my car. I ask if I can keep my tools at their place for safekeeping, to which they agree. I drove down to my dad's old folks' home and had Christmas lunch with him and his new elderly buddies. The following day I go to a hardware store and purchase some newer, sturdier door locks.